Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest today is producer, engineer Joe Chiccarelli. First of all, for as long as tours have been going out, there's always been a question, is it worth it to be the tour opener? So in other words, the opening act on a big tour. Many tours don't actually have one these days, and in other cases, you have to do a buy-in, meaning that you actually have to pay the act in order to perform. That being said, How Music Charts did a study to find out if opening on a tour really helps your career at all, and if there's any correlation with the number of streams that an opening act might have. They found it was all determined by 4 different things. First of all, was the size of the venue. So obviously, if you're going to be touring stadiums and sheds, you're going to get a lot more visibility than you would in smaller clubs. So that makes a big difference. The location of the shows is also a big deal because there are some areas where you may be unknown or your style of music might not be as popular than in other locations. The number of shows is a big deal. So if you just did 2 or 3 shows with a big act, it wouldn't mean nearly as much as if you had done the whole tour with them or half a tour with them. So that's a big deal. And finally, you have to be stylistically compatible with the main act. We've all been to concerts where the opening act was so different from the headliner that they just didn't make any sense. They made no connection with the audience. It had nothing to do with whether they're good or bad. It's just that people were expecting a different type of music. If we look back, there are lots of examples of this. One of the biggest ones that I can remember is when Prince opened for the Rolling Stones on a tour, and he was booed off the stage. Just too different. So that's a big deal. So what they found was the likelihood of immediately converting listeners is pretty low. The caveat to that is, if you're on tour for a long stretch of time, then you'll actually see a boost in your streaming numbers. So is this worth doing? Yes, it's worth doing just for the experience and what you're going to learn from an established artist. But any benefits in streaming is going to take some time to realize. If you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. Also, I'm pleased to announce that the 5th edition of my Mixing Engineer's Handbook is now available. It's totally updated and includes new sections on mixing and immersive audio, self-mastering, new mixer interviews, and much more. Get your copy at a special discounted price at bobbyowsinski.com/handbook. That's bobbyowsinski.com/handbook. You can also find it on Amazon and Apple Books. And remember, you can learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news when you sign up for my newsletter at bobbyowsinski.com. There you'll also find out about openings for my latest online classes and special events. That's bobbyowsinski.com. Now, the AES show was recently held in New York City. This was a big deal because it was the first in-person show since 2019. The AES actually shared the floor with the NAB New York show as well. So there are 2 shows going on at once. The attendance wasn't quite what anybody expected. I think they'll tell you that they really liked the number of people that were there, but in fact, it was lower than most other AES shows in the past. Final attendance was about 7,000 people for the AES, which is maybe a third of what they usually get. And the NAB had 9,500. So you put those 2 shows together and it was still less than what they're used to getting in one AES show. There are about 100 manufacturers there, but a lot didn't show up. One of the reasons why is that New York is a super expensive show. The union especially makes it difficult, and lodging expenses are really high in the city. One of the big complaints was the fact that there was a big line at registration on the first day. And even if you were pre-registered, it still took an hour to get in. And you would think after all this time, this would be the one place that they'd have it together where that wouldn't happen at all. There are many new products that came out. SSL came out with their M-Box Studio and Origin 16-channel console. Avid came out with its Carbon 8-channel mic pre. Universal and Bach Audio showed 4 new condenser microphones. There are a few new API modules. And Sony came out with the C80 microphone. So that sounds like a pretty good list of new products. The fact of the matter is, just about everybody knew about these from being online even before the show, so there were really no new surprises. So when you look at this, you think, well, are trade shows doomed? It's not about the new gear anymore because you really hear about it way before the trade show happens. A lot of it has to do with meeting people there, but that can be done online too. Then there's industry events, and of course that isn't easily replicated online, so that's one positive. And when it comes down to it, I think this is probably more useful for newcomers to the business than for longtime pros. But still, it's nice to see some old friends. And when it comes down to it, that's the best reason to go to a trade show. My guest this week is Joe Chiccarelli, who's a 10-time Grammy-winning producer-engineer mixer, whose credits include Beck, U2, The White Stripes, The Strokes, Killers, Elton John, Morrissey, Jason Mraz, among many, many others. Other projects have included music supervision of films such as Suicide Kings and Men with Guns, the TV series Cracker, and Robert Altman's The Gun. Joe is also the studio designer for the state-of-the-art Royaltone Recording Studios, which is now known as Sphere in Burbank, California, and he's served as an A&R consultant for several major and independent labels. Most recently, Leapwing has released his signature plugin that captures Joe's special sounds on the most common mix elements. During the interview, we spoke about working as a music supervisor, the impetus for his signature plugin, the analog gear that the plugin is based on, producing in different genres, and much more. I spoke with Joe via Zoom from a studio at Sunset Sound in Hollywood. You're based out of Sunset Sound these days, right? Well, that's your old haunt.
Yeah, it has been for the last 10, 12 years, something like that. Yeah, I came here, Greg Wells and I did a project together like in 2005 or something, or 7, I can't remember what it was. And we loved the place so much that we ended up coming back here for projects. And then I started coming back here for other projects on my own, and, ended up doing so many things here, like Jason Mraz, Young the Giant, My Morning Jacket, just so many different lines, Morrissey, so many things over the years. This has really been my home indeed. Yeah.
Are you mixing there as well?
Yeah. So I've got my little space here. I don't know how much you can see of it, but I've got I kind of overlook the parking lot. I don't know if you know Sunset. When you drive in the parking lot there, the main studio building is to the left, but straight ahead there's another couple of houses in there, and there's a few producers in here that have rooms on the lot here. So it's nice. It's a little community here, and it's kind of cool.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
I understand. So then when you need a track, you just go down the studios.
Yeah, so basically, like all my outboard gear, a lot of my outboard gear is all in Studio One, because Studio One was really my hang for years, but it just got too expensive. Budgets couldn't afford it. No one was willing to pay, $1,500 a day to go in and do a vocal. It wasn't going to happen anymore. So I'll go in there for, a week or two, cut my tracks, then come over here, overdub, mix for whatever it takes to finish the album.
Yeah, but see, you saw what was happening with budgets and you rolled with it. You found a way to make it work.
I don't know. I mean, you got to. It's just sort of like just the way records are made now. I mean, the good thing is that there's more opportunities. There's more music being made. So, you kind of have to do 4 times the amount of work because you're in your little space, you're probably not with an assistant or whatever it is. And, you're basically doing the job of 2 to 4 people on your own. And yeah, so I come in here and I'm doing vocals, keyboards, guitars, then I'm mixing. And, it's nice having a space that's yours and, good or bad, you understand the acoustics.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good.
I saw something, I guess it was on your website, that you were a music supervisor for film and TV. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, no, I've done that over the years. I haven't done it in a while, but I've done a bunch of films over the years. In fact, I had a company with I don't know if you know Aaron Jacobus and Steve Pross. We had a company for a while doing music supervision, and that was fun. The problem is that now there's so many people in that game that it just became so competitive that it wasn't fun to do it. Like everything, like somebody approached me the other day about doing an Atmos mix, and they were like, "We have $500 a song."
Ooh, yeah.
Like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Have you done any Atmos?
No, I have really haven't. I've dabbled in it a tiny bit, but look, I love moving forward. I love new formats. I think that the gaming world has certainly shown us that there's much more to be had with spatial audio. And I think everybody's got to embrace that and move forward in a way, whether or not, I guess I just have some objection to how some of the record companies have gone about doing this, where it's like, let's just mix a glut of stuff. Let's not get in touch with the original producers or artists, or I don't know. That hits me the wrong way. No, it's not worth my time. Not at all. And, especially my room is tiny and I couldn't properly do it here. If I had a whole speaker set up, I'd still have to go and take the project over to a proper room and check it out and make sure that it's sounding great there. So, by the time you're done, you're basically broke and you've worked 2 weeks on something. And no, I won't do it.
One of the things that I've noticed, and I've been to a lot of playbacks now of rather famous albums that we all know that don't seem to work in Atmos. I mean, EDM works great, but you get something like The Who and it gets spread out and you go, yeah, but now there's no impact like the stereo.
No, it's very true. You work so hard on a mix to glue everything together and make it all move together and have this life. And then you pull it all apart and then you have to figure out a way to get that same feeling, but all spread out. It's tough.
Yeah.
Like you say, like the energy isn't always the same.
Well, let's get to your plug-in. So yeah. What was the impetus for that then? What basically made you decide to want to do that?
Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, when the folks at Leapwing talked to me about this, I was super excited to be in that company because I really love all the plugins that they make. I use the Center One and the Stage One and all the time, and plus they have their signature line with Al Schmidt, and Al was, just the world to me, just the best. And to be a part of that is quite an honor. But more so, I really thought about people getting started and how it's really tough when you get started. I mean, I remember the first sessions, I did as an engineer. What you would do is copy what other engineers' sessions you saw, and but you never realized that the reason he set it up that way or used that gear was specifically for the type of music and the emotional intention that he had for that piece of music. And it's not about copying the setups, but it's about really understanding the intent and trying to figure out what you do for something that's a heavy rock record would be very different for what you do for a jazz record. And always making presets is a very, very difficult thing. But the thing that's happened to me in the last few years, over the years, I've done presets for UA and a number of companies, which, I love to help them out. And, you make presets and you think like, this is all source dependent. So you really can't get something that is going to work 100%. But the thing that shocked me is the amount of people that have come to me and said, oh man, I use your presets all the time. They're really great. I love them for vocal or bass or whatever it is. And I'm like, really? You do? And I'm quite shocked. So I thought, okay, so there's some legitimacy here. People are actually getting something out of this. And like I was saying earlier, I think that when you first start out, at some point, you're like, well, it's a kick drum, but where do I go? And, how do I build it? And how do I make room for the bass? And how do I make it work together with the bass? And all those sort of things. So I wanted to give everybody like a platform that they could start with. I think we did a good job, and kudos to Robin and everybody at Leapwing. They really found a way to make the presets such that they really do what they're supposed to do, but also there's a large amount of flexibility there that you can really get in and be somewhat granular and really work on the sounds yourself, but you have a starting point that's pretty impactful. It's a good working tool where, if you're starting a mix and you got a kick drum and you're not sure exactly where to go with it, there's options in there, or if it's a bass guitar or whatever. I think at the very least, it's a starting point where you can go, okay, yeah, it's starting to have some size and punch and it's sitting in the right place in the record now, but I need to tailor it a little bit for my song. So there's a little bit of flexibility there.
What I noticed was it's fairly complex because you have complex signal paths that you like to use with lots of gear, but yet it doesn't come across as that complex unless you really look into it and you go, oh yeah, but there's this, and this, and then it goes here. But on the surface, it's not like that.
Good. That's really good to hear, because it is indeed complex. And especially when it comes to drums, I use a lot of parallels, and that's all built in behind the scenes in the plugin. So if you actually were to break it down, you'd be like, oh my God, he's going to several compressors and a couple of different EQs, and it's all getting blended together. But yet at the same time, there's enough flexibility there that you can tweak things, but hopefully it's not too overwhelming in terms of the parameters that you can adjust, that you don't get lost in it, that you can really get started with the sounds. And, for a number of the sounds, there's a graphic EQ there, and that's a real easy thing to manipulate. And, graphics are indeed graphic, they're visual. And I think for most people, you can get a good picture of where you want to go with the sound.
How long did it take to develop?
It actually took a while, but I will say the one great thing about Leapwing is that once they committed to it, man, they dove in, and they worked hard for 6-9 months getting this to bring to market now. A lot of these companies, they're like 4 years out. There's other things I've had in development that people are like, yeah, how's early 24? Really? My idea might be old school by that time,
Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
Well, considering it's all based on analog gear that you use, right?
Pretty much. Yeah, we took like a lot of my personal gear as well as the gear here at Sunset Sound, used that, modeled that, basically brought up different sessions, and then in making the presets, I would basically run, a number of different sessions, everything from things that I had recorded to random projects that clients sent me to mix, where things weren't as processed as I might do. Because, I grew up as you did, in the 24-track analog days, where basically you got your sounds on the tracking date, and it really had to sound like a record. When the producer walked in the room that day with all the band there, it had to sound like it was on the radio,
Yeah.
So you were trying to make a finished product right there at the day of tracking. So I really learned to put all my EQ, compression, delays, etc. on right there on the tracking date. So when musicians walked in after cutting a track, it sounded 80% of the way to a finished record. So yeah, so behind the scenes in the plugin, there is all that gear that I would use, whether it were Pultex or Fairchilds or API EQs or um, whatever. That's all there behind the scenes. My favorite thing about the plugin is that um, we did it over here at Sunset Sound on the old Domidio console, and I won't say it's exactly the Domidio console that was used, but because they did tweak it further. But the interesting thing, as you know, about most analog consoles is they really react differently the way you drive them. And, if you hit them hard, it's one sound. If you hit them cold, it's a cleaner, more open sound, less sort of compressed. And so the guys at Leapwing were able to kind of model the line input of that console and capture what that line input level does to the sound of the signal chain. And then they also modified it with a bunch of different, it's hard to explain, but they modified it in a way that there is definitely a character knob. It's sort of my favorite knob in the plugin is the drive knob, because an EQ, what an EQ does, a compressor does what it's supposed to do, unless you really drive it differently hard. But the drive seems to react very differently to different instruments at different levels. And I love that. I found that it's almost like having yet another type of EQ to choose from, because just the way you kind of push the plug in. And I tend now to, being all in the box, I tend to sometimes really saturate things digitally, really distort them and give them a character, especially with rock music where you want things aggressive. Digital distortion has its own flavor, and it can be really pretty intense. So sometimes I'll deliberately digitally distort things and then bring the levels down to where they're manageable, but getting that extra crunch and attack edge sometimes gives things a lot of personality. So I'm not afraid of distorting things or saturating things. And you can do that in the plugin as well. So there's really, I think you can take it as far as you'd like to take it, but know that behind the scenes, there might be 10 different devices that are really working as if I were sitting at the console with 4 different parallels on drums or 2 different ones on bass, or in the case of vocals, sometimes it's multiple compressors and EQs. So, you got a lot to work there. It's like having, 6 or 8 plugins in a chain in one instance.
That being said, there's so much music these days that is made up of loops, made up of samples. So, for instance, you'd get a drum loop where, it'd be stereo and the whole drum loop would be there. I always get asked about this. So, this is the way I work. What do I do? Are there presets for that?
For actually loops specifically, no. Right, the basic initial plug-in is going to come with drums, bass, guitar, piano, vocal, just the sort of basics, if you will, rhythm section. What they're planning to do is every month or every 3 months release a different set of plugins that would be more instruments, different types of music, just more things to choose from. I think that having the presets to choose from is great, but the thing we were afraid of was initially overwhelming people, that if they had a dozen kick drum plugins, they might get lost just in the presets, let alone, wanting to put other plugins in the chain. So we sort of thought we'd streamline it in the first issue of the plugin. And then as things go along, there'll be more presets. In fact, what we're trying to do, and probably Robin will kill me, by telling you this, but what I really want to do is have my friends do presets on top of my presets. In other words, to take my presets and tweak them to their liking, whether it's for the style of music they do or just their own personal tastes. So we're hoping that what we can do in further issues of the plugin is offer the Dave Pensado version, the Nico Bolas version, or whatever it might be, where somebody can go in and go, okay, I like what he's doing here with the bass, but for me, I think it's got to be a little brighter to cut through the track. Or, when I do kind of R&B music, I want it to be a little more scooped out and that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that what you see is in the future, there'll be multiple packages that you'll get for the plugin where you'll have various styles of music and various other engineers and producers contributing to it. I want to call it reset my preset.
I love it. I love it. What are the reverbs based on?
Good question. A number of things. Classic EMT plate, a live chamber here at Sunset. Although, once again, things are indeed tweaked a little bit. There's also AMS reverb in there as well. And, they're my settings on all this sort of stuff. They have pre-delays and sometimes even feedback, and really, really kind of tweaked to the way I might do it in a session. So you really do have, a number of, what might take you 6 plugins on an instrument is kind of all there in one.
So when you're mixing and you're in your room there, I take it you're mostly in the box.
Pretty much. I have a analog stereo bus chain that I use. So I have a Burl summing network and a Burl A to D. So basically everything goes through my analog summing and then out through Curve Bender and Shadow Hills and SSL, whatever it might be for the material. But all my balancing, all my EQ, compression, etc., is all plugins. Occasionally I'll use hardware inserts for a reverb, something like that. But just because of the recallability, it's all in the box. I mean, everything these days, every project, people want to tweak and tweak and tweak. And, the days when you and I started, it was sort of like, if you were mixing an album and it was 10 songs, you were in the studio for 10 days, you were done, and that's it. But now, a mix on an album can take 3 to 6 months because people are constantly, trying to revise this and tweak this. And, the A&R guy wants this, the manager wants this, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. Besides revisions, though, how long does it take you on a mix now before you get to revision stage?
It takes me at least a couple of days. I'm slow. If I'm setting it all up myself, it's a number of hours just to get it set up in a form that, the labeling is right. And then, I'll dig into it for a while and I might get bored or tired or feel like I'm kind of getting too myopic and need a little break, and then I'll come back to it. But it's usually, a day and a half to 2 days before I send it out to the artist. And then from there, it's whatever tweaks they want to make. And hopefully it's not too many revisions. Usually it's a couple. Yeah. So, I mean, really minimum an album is taking me 20 days, So I'm pretty much, if I'm mixing an album, it's really a month of my time when it's done. By the time you send it out, get all the files printed, etc., send it out. And it's just me because I'm picky and slow and just in my own space and, want to revisit things. And, then I'll sometimes feel like, well, you know what, now that I got a flow going on, I should go back to the first tune and see if I can make the first tune fit a little better with these others because you kind of refine their direction and overall sound as you go along.
And we talked about loops before. Are you getting any kind of music like that that's loop based?
Not that much stuff. I mean, I've done some electronic things, and recently just did something with Little Dragon. It was all electronic, but in terms of like sort of dance stuff that's loops. You mean like loops as in the avalanches, like where they've taken something off of vinyl and turned it into the drum track?
Yeah.
No, not that much. I mean, that's kind of fun. I love doing that stuff. But I haven't done it. Seemed like late 90s, early 2000s, that was a thing, but not too much now. Usually it's some elements are programmed or sampled. I mean, I'm always putting samples in with my drums. People want that consistency of tone and they want the impact. And, we're used to MIDI drums and, MIDI sounds are basically like compressed sounds. And I think everybody wants that kind of tone to their mix where the drums sit there and every beat is constant and big and powerful. So I'm always kind of layering things with samples.
Yeah, everything has changed. I mean, back when bands were tracking in the studio, there was changes in intensity that you got from the band dynamics. And now it's one dynamic and you change it by just adding multiple parts or taking them away. So it's completely different than it used to be.
Oh, very, very true. You definitely, I mean, a lot of the music that I produce is still a large element live players, but you're right. It's a subtractive thing as opposed to a dynamic that comes from a human that I even find that part of my mixing process, I'm actually, in a sense, layering my mix, getting my mix dynamics by adding additional compressors as I go along. Not necessarily on the stereo bus, but like I might have a drum sound that works for the verse. And then at the chorus, I'll add another compressor and make the drum sound fatter for the chorus as if the guy were hitting harder or the kick and snare at least were dug into more, whatever it is. So yeah, I kind of feel like you're right. The process is almost an electronic additive or subtractive process that it's never anybody plays quiet or it's kind of either on and off dynamics,
And it's the same with tempo. The tempo is so steady. I do what makes a song a hit for my subscribers. So I take, a song might be whatever is hot today, or it might be an old song. And there was a couple that I came across that were big hits. One was Goodbye Stranger from Supertramp way back when. And when you listen to it, the tempo starts at like 120 and it ends at 129. And it's not because the players were out of control. It was because
that was the intention.
That was the intention. And when it picks up to 129 at the end, the excitement went way up. And it's like, wow, this is why this feels so good.
Exactly. I mean, God, listen to any Dylan song.
Yeah.
Listen to anything from that era. Yeah, things got more intense, in the choruses and opened up and got spacious in the verse. And yeah, I won't say that's a thing of the past, but I think it's less important, less a part of most music now. Certainly pop music,
Yeah.
Pop music, hip hop music is all so programmed and all about consistent beats and intensity and power and being, all there loud at every moment.
When you're producing, you actually go across genres quite a lot. Is that hard for you?
No, it's actually great. It's a really great challenge. It keeps me kind of excited. It's a whole new ball game. I mean, next week I'm doing something that's very sort of rock, but in a very 90s sort of way, where I don't know, just recently I did something that was much more retro and blues and R&B flavored, almost. I don't want to say Amy Winehouse, but it had a retro kind of element to it. So that's the challenge to me, is kind of wearing different suits and kind of diving into that world for 3 months or whatever it takes you on the project, and then the next project is something different, and you really get to dive into a world where it's all about heavy high gain guitars, where the last album you were using a Fender Champ or whatever it was. So that's pretty fun.
But that being said, does it take you any time to kind of get into the new genre? It's nothing that you can kind of switch on and off. It really does. It takes a little time to sort of put that suit of clothes on and understand what you're living in, and it being true to that, But the good thing is that sometimes all those influences from other things, in other words, the hard rock project that you just lived for the last 3 months, and then your next project is some folk singer. I think you then go, well, this feels timid and small, and I got to toughen this up. I got to put some life in it. So I almost think, in a way, you sort of suddenly cross-pollinize things and really make for something more interesting, because you bring all those influences in. And from my ear, the best records, the best artists are the ones that sort of borrow from a lot of different genres, a lot of different styles, and find a way to make this melting pot and make it their own unique thing, Yeah.
I think that's part of the magic of it.
When you're tracking, when you're producing, you're not doing the engineering yourself, right? You bring somebody in.
Sometimes I do. Most of the time, and a lot of it's because of budgeting, I'll do it myself. But, it really depends on the project. There have been times where, for instance, I've done a number of jazz albums, and I might feel like I might not be the right guy for this. My approach might be a little heavy-handed. So I want to get somebody to work with who's a more traditional kind of engineer and understands the sounds for the music, where I might come in and just tweak it a little too much. So it's been fun for me to work with people and get a little outside perspective on things.
Yeah. When you're tracking, are you always using the same gear?
Mm-mm. I mean, as much as I'll work in the same room here at Sunset, and I often work at other studios, be it Blackbird in Nashville or, I don't know, Electric Lady or whatever, I almost deliberately try to change things up every project, whether it's different drum mics, different guitar mics. Certainly, I'm looking for different sounds in my head. I'm kind of, one project might want a slicker, brighter sound. Next project might want something that's heavier on the low end and darker overall. So I might be using more ribbon mics for that and less microphones for that, where, the harder rock thing I'll do next week, I'll probably use more microphones on the drums, and I'll probably use brighter microphones. Typically I might use just a mono 47 or mono C37A as a drum overhead for something that's more groove oriented. But for a heavy rock thing, I'll probably have a pair of overheads that are brighter, more hi-fi, more detailed. And then I might have Coles or something as well to capture a bit of a kind of compressed drum tone. So, I'll change up my microphones, change up how I treat the room mics. Definitely, different compressors will get used. Yeah, I would say every project, at least 20% of the setup is different.
I like to hear that.
Yeah. No, we all have our go-to things, our compressors we like, or our mics we like, or, the favorite part of the room for the drums and things like that. So there's things that are consistent, but I will try things a lot. With room mics, sometimes it might be a pair of Coles in the middle of the room. Other times it's 87s at the back end of the room. Most of the time there's some stereo ribbon in front of the drum kit, or maybe even for heavier stuff, something close to the floor to get a little bit more kind of air in the low end. So yeah, it just really depends on the music and kind of what I'm hearing for it.
Okay, last question, Joe.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that people don't know about what you do that you wish they did?
I don't know if I wish they would know about it. It's because it's the amount of time that I'll put in before and after the workday. In other words, before I even start the project, I'll really do a lot of research. I don't know, perhaps listening to the artist's last few albums, or listening to demos and making notes. I try not to listen to demos too much because I don't want to get tied into them. I want to, have some spontaneity there and some freshness and objectivity. So I don't want to listen to people's demos too much because, as you just get married to parts, and it might be the parts are really bad, but you've just heard them about 1,000 times and they become the song. So I try not to do too much of that, but I'm really always planning things out and thinking. And at the end of the day, I'm thinking, okay, what went right? What went wrong? What do I need to fix later? Where can this go? And how much further can I take this record? Or have I taken it too far? And do I have to dial it back? So it's not like you go in the studio for 8-10 hours and that's the end of it. When I dive into a project, it becomes, 7 days a week, your entire life. You wake up in the middle of the night going, I know how to fix this problem. I got it.
You can find out more about Joe at joechiccarelli.com. That's Joe Chiccarelli, CHICCARELLI.com. You can also find out about his signature plugin at Leapwing.com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOwsinski.com. Remember that you can learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news when you sign up for my newsletter at BobbyOwsinski.com. There you'll also find out about openings for my latest online classes and special events. That's BobbyOwsinski.com. To listen to the episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to BobbyOwsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to BobbyOinnerCircle.com, or you can find it in Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, Mixcloud, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, and Podbean. At BobbyOwsinski.com and BobbyOinnerCircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.